Welcome to the Learn Guitar podcast from the National Guitar Academy, the podcast that makes you a better guitarist. We're going to share some of our best guitar tips with you today. We'll discuss chords and chord technique. We'll share some lead guitar secrets. We'll tell you how to sound more rhythmic and musical, and we'll also teach you some music theory. I'm your host, Mike Kennedy, and joining me today are Jack Taylor. Who have we got here? We've got a full crew, Rob Soulsby and Andy Hignett. Let's get started with our first segment, Lead Lines. Okay, Lead Lines is the part of the show where we discuss lead guitar techniques, scales, riffs, solos, and secondary guitar techniques. Okay, today we're going to talk about the role of a lead guitarist. This is super important. Jack, you came up with the idea for this one today. I really like this concept that we're going to discuss. Do you want to just expand on it a little bit?
Yeah, so I think when many people think of a lead guitarist in general, they just think about someone who takes solos, you know, those shred guys with like epic, you know, hair blowing in the wind. I think that's what most people think, but it's really not the case, is it? So like
Steve Vai on top of Mount Everest, like
yeah. I think he actually uses a fan on stage. I've seen him. There's like a genuine fan which
Does
blows
he?
his
To
hair
give him the hair lift. Yeah. That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
you have to dash across the stage as well, don't you?
Zoom.
But yeah, I think even though that's the stereotype, it's not the actual case. Like there's loads of really great lead guitarists who don't do that, who use more chords and stuff to embellish ideas. So we kind of wanted to just clear the air a little bit today and figure out, you know, what is a lead guitarist and what do they actually do.
Fantastic suggestion. Really good idea. Andy, what do you think, mate, when you think about a lead guitarist? Like, what's the role of a lead guitarist? Because we can talk about scales and riffs and all these different things, but you know, at its kind of top level, what's the role of a lead guitarist?
Well, the basic role, in contrast to rhythm guitar, is where rhythm guitarists are usually playing chords, lead guitarists are usually playing melodies, and they might extend those melodies into mad solos, like Jack was saying, and stuff like that, or all sorts of on-stage antics, but primarily their role is actually to play melody.
Rob, how do you see it? The role of a lead guitarist?
The role of the lead guitarist for me is the emotional kind of driver for the music. The person who
Without the epic hair.
Yeah.
So you need more than hair.
Yeah, you need more than hair and a funny duck walk or whatever. It's just, it gives, I think, just the emotion from a sense of humour or like a surging kind of macho or whatever, or something more wistful.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things I think that you see, you know, like you see it here in this discussion that we're having, is that music is, you know, it's different things to different people. And I think lead guitar is different things to different people.
Sure.
It all depends on how you approach it from. But I think, you know, specifically, you know, in my mind, the lead guitarist job, it isn't to deliver an amazing solo. That's part of the job. The way I see it is, a lead guitarist job is to kind of dip in and out of the song, making valuable contributions. So it can be chord based, it can be single note based stuff, or, you know, arpeggios or scales or whatever it might be. But in some ways, it's useful to have like the definitions, isn't it? Rhythm guitarist, lead guitarist, bass guitarist. But in some ways, I think that can make people think in terms that are too narrow. You know, so if you think about a really expressive lead guitarist, Jack, what are you seeing from them? What are they doing on stage? What's a great example of a well-rounded lead guitarist to you?
I just think someone who isn't too overbearing, like someone who's just like, I think a great lead guitarist is someone who sits in within the band, not someone who's going, hey, I'm here, look, I'm here, I'm playing lead guitar, you know, pay attention. It's someone who sits back and plays something which is, you know, going to add character to the song, not which something is going to be way too much,
A lead guitarist who's a team player, that's it's quite rare, that, actually. It's quite rare, but yeah, okay. So let's talk about some specific steps that people can follow to ensure that they become a well-rounded lead guitarist. You know, so obviously we want people to they need to have great chord knowledge, I think, you know, not just scale knowledge. But in terms of scales, Andy, what scales are essential for a lead guitarist to know?
Yeah, well, the first scale I would show to anyone would be a pentatonic scale. I think if you only ever learn one scale, it should be that. You should learn more than one, but if you only learn one, that should be the one you learn.
So like classic, minor pentatonic, that's where you would suggest people start. Okay, and then where would you suggest they go next?
From there we'd probably go for major scale, I think full major scale.
Awesome. Okay, so minor pentatonic to begin with, full major scale next.
Yeah.
Then where would you suggest they go?
Probably to the natural minor, I think would be the next step.
Okay, cool. So natural minor scale. And then, you know, like after that, where do you think they need to go? What would you suggest? What happens next?
But beyond that, if they're still really keen to learn more scales, things like modes are quite good to look at.
Awesome. Okay, so there's a really nice pathway there that Andy's just laid out. So from a scale point of view, minor pentatonic, major scale, minor scale, and then you can get into some modes and run wild with all of that stuff. Rob, when you think about lead guitarists that you admire, what kind of things do you see in their play that, you know, inspire you or connect with you emotionally or make you want to, you know, replicate what they're doing, or, you know, what's... You know, because I don't want us to get too bogged down with scales. I'm driving at. You know, that's important, but there's more to it than that.
I think in some ways it's all about placement of notes, knowing when to play that particular set of notes, and it can just be one note literally, and how long you leave it to resonate or to sustain, and it can be simple like that. But for me,
it's not about volume of notes.
No. For lead guitar, it's about the placement. Because it could be a fill, if you like in drumming, but with guitar you could have a lead fill, just at the end of a line of a verse.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bit that hooks you as well. And having a good hook, I would say, a good riff or a hook, that can make it.
Jack, what are some of the things that, like, lead guitarists, you know, that you want to see them? So we've spoke about scales. We spoke about not just having a high volume of notes, but picking these shots, basically, is what Rob suggested. What are the other things that are there, before we wrap up this section, what are the other things that you'd like to see from someone who wants to become an epic lead guitarist?
I think kind of like going on from what Rob was saying, but just space and awareness. Like, one thing which I've always done from playing in bands and stuff is I never get in the way of a vocalist or something. Yeah. When it comes to bands, as far as I'm concerned, the vocalist is the main person in the band. You're the person who's kind of supporting them and propping them up.
Yeah.
And you never want to hear, like, while someone is singing, lead guitar over the top of it, like in a verse or something. It just sounds awful. But you can pick the moments in between when they don't sing. That's when you can just, you know, add in a little garnish or something like that. And it's just, it's really helpful, and it helps your phrasing, and it helps you sound much better because you're not getting away. It's like when you have... everyone has that one person that they know is when you try and speak, and they're just like chit-chatting all the time.
It's usually me.
But like you can't get a word in edgeways, can you? So and it's horrible because you're like trying to speak. Yeah. But like and it's the same thing with lead guitar. You need to give it space, you know, let it breathe a little bit. There's
etiquette, isn't there? There's etiquette in you know in any social interaction. But you know, if you're playing with other musicians, I mean, that'd be a great topic for a future podcast. Would be, you know, how to jam. You know, like how to interact with other musicians. Just two final things that I'd throw in here would be, from a lead guitar point of view, it's incredibly useful. In fact, I'd say it's essential that you understand keys. So we've not really discussed it in a great detail today, you know, but two things that I would really recommend anybody who wants to be a really competent lead guitarist does is learn and understand about keys, and also make sure that you understand the cage system so as that you've got great chord knowledge, because that massively enhances a lead guitarist. So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here, haven't we? We've spoke about scales, how you make solos work, you know, the etiquette of being a lead guitarist, not taking over, and the cage system and understanding keys. So I hope you found that useful, guys. For each podcast, we create a bonus pack that expands on what we've discussed in the episode. Each bonus pack includes video lessons, diagrams, chord boxes, links, and practice material that build on the things we've discussed in the podcast. There's only so much that we can explain through audio, and sometimes it's easier to show you stuff, and that's where the bonus packs come in handy. To download the bonus pack for this episode, go to nationalguitaracademy.com/podcast3. And Jack, what's in the bonus pack for lead lines for this episode?
So there'll be some links to some really great articles on lead guitar playing and how you can, you know, make that journey and go forward from there. Also some really good examples of some lead guitar playing.
Okay, cool. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next part of today's show, which is quick chords.
Quick
Chords is the part of the show when we discuss chords and chord technique. Okay, Jack, we've got a cool chord that we're going to share with people this week, and then we're going to speak about an interesting piece of chordal technique. Run us through this chord, dude. I really like this one.
So this chord's a G major 7. So here's what it sounds like.
Nice.
So it's a little bit unconventional in the way that it's played, but the basic tab for it is 3, 2, 0, 0, 0, 2.
Really nice chord, that one. And where would you see that chord crop up? Like, nice chord to have in your locker. It's not that often that you see it or hear it. But how would you use that one, Mike? Give us a bit of...
I mean, like, I tend to quite like it for just, open chord stuff, to add a little bit of variety to like a normal G chord.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's just a real nice movement to it there.
It's got a nice feel, hasn't it? It's got a really nice feel to that one. Just so you understand that, guys, Jack's just kind of spelled out the tab of that chord, but you'll be able to see the chord box for that chord in the bonus pack for this episode. Okay, the next thing that we were going to discuss here was people often get in touch with us and ask how they can enhance or embellish their chords. So we thought it'd be really useful to just have a quick chat about, like when you were playing chords, what we can do to... I think what people are driving at when they ask that question is things that they can add to that above and beyond just the chord voicing. Rob, what would, like, when you're playing the acoustic at home, you're playing a chord progression that you've played a million times, you want to make it a bit more snazzy, what type of things do you do?
The first thing I would do is have a go at lifting fingers on and off, so have hammer-ons, and play around with that and what kind of effect it has. Also, you could play around with the voicings, so as we've said previously, if you think of a chord as having a bass, a medium and a treble section, you can think how you voice them just from the basic chord. So
okay, sorry Rob, just to jump in there, let's just give people an example of how that sounds. So if we think, so here's an E minor chord. Okay, now what we discussed there was like using hammer-on. So for people that aren't familiar with the technique, that's when you just lift one of your fingers off and then press your finger, pluck it and then press your finger down. So you actually pluck once, but we hear two notes. So that's a really great way to turn this into this. So anytime that you're raising your fingers off the notes there and bringing them down, that's a hammer-on, and doing it in reverse, that's a pull-off. So that's so if we show that in context, so like an E minor, if I was strumming E minor like this, okay, so that sounds okay. But if I try a couple of hammer-ons in there, it just sounds much more interesting, doesn't it? All of a sudden it's like, ooh, there's something happening in there, So I think hammer-ons are probably the easiest way to embellish your chords, because it doesn't require you do anything more than you're sort of already doing. You've already got those fingers there in the right place holding the chord. And as a general rule, if you're whatever chord you're playing, as a very rough rule, you can usually hammer on one of the notes that you're holding. That's for open chords. Doesn't work for every chord, but for most chords that you play, if you just experiment with raising one of your fingers off, usually, probably about 75% of the time, that'll sound okay. Jack, give me some other ideas. So like chord embellishments, making a chord progression sound a bit more textured, a bit more variety. What can we do?
So a kind of really cool thing which I used to do quite a lot is you don't actually have to strum all the time. What you can do is if you're playing, say your chord progression was like E minor to G, so what you could do to kind of bring it to life a little bit is just pick individual notes from it. It just gives it a little bit of texture. I used to use it loads when I was doing like open mic nights and singer-songwriter type stuff, because it would just break up the song, and it wouldn't mean by strumming for 3 minutes. Like, it's just a really good way of doing that. I think that's really a fundamental and very useful point you've made there, mate. It's just that
chords don't have to be presented as like a wall of sound. You know, it's often much more interesting if you just target certain parts of the chord, or even break it down into almost like arpeggio form as you just played there. It's much more interesting to listen to, isn't it?
Even if you combine that with like the hammer on stuff as well, going. It really becomes alive. Yeah, it's good.
Andy, is there anything we've missed here, mate? So,
well, I'm quite a big fan of different voicings of chords. So if we have like a big load of D in a song, rather than just like the wall of sound, like you say, just a big generic wall of D. What we can sometimes do is
the wall of D.
Yeah, we can start with that D. Move up to some. To some other voicings, and that's all one chord, but it sounds quite varied.
Okay, so that sounded awesome. So let's just make that clear to people what you were doing there. So you were playing different voicings of D. So we had like low D, mid D, high D.
Yeah.
You kind of moved through them there, and we got that kind of. There was a much more interesting spectrum, wasn't there? Within there. Yeah. Much more interesting range. Okay, so in the bonus pack for today's episode, Jack, what have we got in the bonus pack for the quick chord section?
So we'll provide the chord box for the G major 7 chord, as well as the other chord boxes that Andy was just discussing.
Okay, perfect. And I think we're also going to chuck in some. We're also going to do a video, aren't we, that captures some of those kind of hammer-on techniques that we can use. Okay, cool. Now we're going to move on to the next section of the show, which is tips and advice.
You've got a question, I've got some answers. You got a question for you, I've got tips and advice.
Tips and advice is the part of the show when we answer your questions about guitar and music culture. If you've got a question for us, please email us at podcast@nationalguitaracademy.com and we'll try our best to help you out. Okay, so we've got an email here from John Bridgehouse that says, "Hi Mike, just got together with 2 other guitarists. We are now all on acoustic. Need some ideas how to make the sound of what we're playing sound fuller and more interesting rather than just 3 blokes strumming the same chords." Okay, so great question there from John. Thanks very much for sending that in, because I know this is something that will help a lot of other people. I think, the first thing that jumps to mind for me is that it's really important when you get together with other musicians. Like, there's a classic pathway that all guitarists follow when they start playing with other musicians. To begin with, you all just play the same thing, which is exactly what you've said here in the question.
No.
Well, because you don't really know what extra stuff you can do. No. But what I'd say is 3 people playing an acoustic guitar, all playing the same chords, that's going to sound very monotonous. And we spoke earlier about the wall of D, but that's going to be like a real wall of sound. It's really important when you play with other people that you're clear on what roles each person is contributing. So you don't have to go, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, bass guitar, but it's important that one person, holds it down with, a kind of more fuller chord sound, and then other people can kind of break off and add different parts, right? So let's get specific on this, right? So let's say guitarist number 1, whoever that might be. So let's say that's you, John, and you're playing a chord progression which is just G to C, for example. So let's say it was something like. Let's say it was something like that, G to C, and then G, and then D. So if everyone plays the same thing, it's going to sound pretty samey. But let's explore some different techniques that we could use there, right? So, Jack, what jumps to mind for you? So if guitarist number 1 is playing exactly what I was just playing, what could guitarist number 2 do in that scenario?
So the first thing I would try and do is just add a little bit of embellishment and maybe play some different kind of chords. I mean, you don't have to go crazy with different voicings, but you could use the same chords and just pick individual different parts of it. Okay. So do you want to just quickly demonstrate that? Okay,
so what you're going to play here is you're going to target some different parts of those chords.
Yeah, just like different sections.
Okay, so let's do that. So. and now I won't play. If you can just play again there, Jack, just go around once with just what you were playing. And what I want people to hear here is how sparse it is at times.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give it a try. Nice. Lots of silence.
Yeah.
Lots of silence. So I hope that people can hear from that, you know, what Jack was playing alone there maybe wouldn't really carry a full track by any means. But what we're doing here is we're contributing different things in different layers that overall adds up to a better overall sound. Andy, when you think about this, so imagine you've got 3 students in a room.
Yeah.
They're all got their acoustics. They're all dead keen. You know, they all want to get cracking and contribute something.
Yeah.
Like, what guidance would you give them beyond what we've suggested here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've got 3 guitarists, that can be a bit crowded. And if someone's not willing to play bass, what you could do is maybe say, okay, well, we've got someone doing rhythm guitar and someone doing more kind of lead guitar like we had there.
Yeah.
But the other guitar, I suppose, we could fit in doing maybe rhythm guitar as well, but with some higher up voicings.
Nice.
Or maybe just play some arpeggios and that kind of thing.
Great suggestion.
So it sort of gives us a lot of different textures.
Really, really good idea. So I guess specifically, John, just to give you like a specific example that you can follow, you know, so number one, I would say you need to define some roles of who's going to do what, so you don't all just play the same chords. Number 2, make the chord progression clear to everybody that's there, so everybody understands what they're doing, and give people time to figure out what a different voicing of that might be. So the next step, I would say, number 3, would be experiment with targeting different parts of the same chords. So you might be playing the exact same chords, but you're just specifically targeting, you know, I don't know, higher or lower notes within that chord. And I guess step number 4 would be try some completely different voicings of that chord. So you've got quite a few things there that you can experiment with. But basically it's about trying to make all 3 people contribute something unique. Isn't it really? That's what we want to do.
I would also suggest you record yourselves so you basically see what you sound like together and then play around with that, because when you listen back critically it's different to when you're listening when you're playing.
Yeah.
You'll see the whole audio landscape of what you've achieved, so you can see where it might need something taken away. You might want, I think a little bit of bass line is there, or a little bit of a very high treble.
The other thing is, I think sometimes when you're in the zone, especially if you're a relatively new guitarist, is you can be really nervous when you're playing, and you can't necessarily hear what was good or what was bad, or so. That's a good idea of recording it, and it gives you a bit of perspective, doesn't it, on what you've done.
And it also does, when you're playing with other people, you do tend to, in that situation to be in with, listen to yourself. You get the general gist of where your group's going, but you listen to yourself too much, probably.
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to listen to how the whole ensemble sounds together, and then you can see which role actually needs, you know, the dynamics of it fiddling around with.
A really good suggestion. That's when you get to like argue about, well, why don't you just drop out there and just let me play this?
Well, that's
really,
it.
really fun.
It's
bit, you know.
Critical listening is absolutely essential if you're going to be in a jam or.
It is. It's just, and it's quite hard to be critical or objective when you're focusing so much on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I hope that helps, John. Really great question, and I hope we've given you some new things to think about there. I guess it's just about making sure that each person is playing something different to the other one that still contributes. And hopefully if you follow those tips, you should find that, you know, you've got a decent framework there to just kind of nudge you onto the next level of jamming skill. Okay, the next question we've got here is from Miguel Gallego, and Miguel has written in, thank you, Miguel. The question is, hi Mike, thanks for the opportunity to chime in. I struggle with daily practice, finding the time, and figuring out what to work on to make improvements. It all seems piecemeal. Do you have suggestions for planning and executing a practice routine? So another fantastic question. Thank you so much for sending that in. Okay, right, this one's going straight to Jack, because Jack is the practice machine. And I think that Miguel will probably get the most from you on this one, Jack. Okay. So, what would you suggest?
So first, let's tackle it one by one. So if you're struggling with daily practice and finding the time, what I would do with your week is look at your whole week as a whole and find the specific times when you're free and target those times as to when you're going to practice. And if you can find specific times in the week when you're going to do it, that you're more likely to achieve it on a day-to-day basis. So for example, for me, because I work every day from around 9 till 5:30. The time which I have every day is my lunch time, and I get half an hour at lunch. So finding I'm not doing other stuff, but that's when I do my practice. Okay, if you want to figure out what to work on, you need to have like a goal in place. Think about what you want to achieve. This can be anything. It could be maybe you want to learn chords to a song which you really love. Maybe you want to work on your lead guitar technique. It doesn't matter. But when you're thinking of a goal, one of the most important things I think for you to figure out is to have something which you thoroughly enjoy. So mine at the moment is to learn a guitar solo, which I like just because it's fun and it's good stuff. But have that goal in mind and just have that as your main goal, and that'll help you structure everything which comes underneath it, which is where like stuff like sub goals come in, and even smaller sub goals.
Yeah, so that's what I was hoping that you cover that off for. So I think that's a great first suggestion, mate. Is like have a goal.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of guitarists don't, other than to just learn the guitar or to have fun or whatever. But I think having a defined goal, I think, is really important. But like you're really methodical about this, Jack. So like if you were gonna, could you give us an example of what one of your goals would be and what the sub goals would be, and how you would approach that? Because I think what Miguel's looking for here, I think, is a kind of really structured kind of plan that he can follow. So for other people who want to learn in that same way, could you give us an example? Yeah.
So let's say, for example, like your main goal is going to be, I want to learn song X. Let's say it's Stand By Me, right? So the first port of call is you should probably learn the chords. So the chords to Stand By Me are G, C, E minor, and D. Yeah. So a sub goal could be I'm going to learn a G chord today. Yeah. The second one could be I could learn an E minor on the next one C, next one D.
So you're really breaking it down.
Yeah, but you could learn all of those in one practice session, but doing like little sub chords like that really helps it be concise and be productive.
It makes things bite-sized, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And then another example of a song with a goal would be to learn the strumming pattern, or to learn the song structure or something like that.
Yeah, so you're kind of assembling all the different like bits that you need to build this overall thing, aren't you? I think some people maybe, or certainly speaking personally, I don't really perceive music in that kind of, I need component A, component B, and component C. But I think that's a really useful way to approach it for people who are of that mindset. Andy, you've always got some good sort of, practice tips for students. I've noticed that in the past from lessons that we've done. Like, what advice would you give to Miguel here? Yeah. He obviously wants to get the most out of his practice time. How should he approach it?
Yeah, well, I always think it's, how often you practice is important, but it's what you do in that practice time that ultimately makes the difference. So if you only find you've got 5 minutes to practice in a day, make sure that you prioritise what you're going to practice and make sure you make the most of those 5 minutes. I mean, ideally you want to practice more than that, but if that's all you've got time for, make sure you make the most of those 5 minutes.
Be clear on the goal. I think that's the message that's coming through here, isn't it? Set a goal, and have that in mind. Rob, what do you think? Like, because I mean, as I said, speaking personally for me, I've never really had a practice routine or regime. Maybe that's why I was so bad for so long on the guitar. But I never had like a practice that goal. But my goal was just have fun, rock out, dude. Like that was my sort of outlook.
Now, for me, I think you've got to, because it's a physical process playing the guitar, you've got to treat it like a form of exercise in a physical way. So I would recommend you have a kind of 3-part practice where you have a warm-up, where you hit the spot that you want to, and then you have a kind of ease-off, cool-down or warm-down section. Yeah. Because especially when you're just starting out, it takes a toll on your fingers, your fingertips, your forearms or your shoulders. So making sure you're warmed up and you've got that flexibility. And also, by having a slight warm-up, it gets you in tune with the guitar and the whole sound of what it is you want to achieve before you address it. So it's an orientation kind of thing.
There's loads of good advice there. I wish you three had told me that like 20 years ago, because there's so much good advice there. I hope that helps, Miguel. There's certainly, tons and tons of wisdom in what the guys have said there. But, I mean, for people who, maybe a bit more like me and kind of don't really like the idea of kind of practice time, and being structured about things, I guess I would say, just follow the things that you're really, really passionate about in music, because some people, just don't perceive, they don't come to the guitar from a place of achievement. They come to it as an escape, or they come to it as a way to relax or express themselves, and sometimes the idea of structured practice, it isn't compatible with that. So, but it's hard, isn't it? Because structured practice is what makes you better, which will make you, much more likely to be able to achieve the goals you want. So I think you do definitely need a bit of practice in there. Okay, in the bonus pack for this segment, what you're going to find is I've got a really useful video there from a guy I found on YouTube called Jim Lil with some practice tips, which is really cool. We'll include a link to that. And also we'll include some chord boxes for some movable shapes that will help out with John's question. And also we're going to include some chord practice drills, a very structured program that we put together there, which will be useful for Miguel. So if you want to check them out, go to nationalguitaracademy.com/podcast3. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next part of today's show, which is rhythm section.
Rhythm section. Rhythm section.
Rhythm section is the part of the show when we discuss how to boost your rhythmic ability and make your guitar playing sound more musical. Okay, cool. So this week we're going to talk about hybrid picking. Jack, explain to us what it is. What's hybrid picking?
So basically, hybrid picking is when you have your thumb placed like you normally would if you're using a plectrum, but you're also using your second, third and fourth finger as well to pick the other string. So you have two options. It's
okay,
like,
so we're holding a pick in our hand.
Yeah.
But we're also finger picking at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that blows my mind completely. So, like, how do we do that? Can you explain that to people? Like, people will be listening to this who've never heard of it, and they'll be thinking, "How can I play with a pick and my fingers at the same time?"
Yeah. So, like, usually you kind of use the pick more on the bass. No, it's kind of like what you would do with finger picking, but you're using a pick instead.
Okay, so instead of using our thumb to finger pick,
Yeah.
we're using the guitar pick for those. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, as a general rule, like, this can always change, but just to get started, just kind of assign your pick to your low E string, your A string, and your D string, and then the rest of your fingers to the top strings. So that's the G string, B, and E, just to kind of get around the guitar a bit.
Okay. And this is, just before you give us an example of that, Jack, this is a technique that's sometimes referred to as chicken picking, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same thing, but we're using a slightly more, like, cool sounding, like, serious hybrid picking. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
also chicken picking.
Yeah.
Okay, so give us an example of how that sounds.
So, like, here's like what it would sound like using chords. So it's often used with country guys when I go. Or often people will use it for stuff like blues. It can be used in any genre. Like, it's a really useful asset.
So what's the benefit of it? Like, because obviously it's, like, really quite fiddly to do.
Yeah.
You know, it requires people to learn a really sort of unusual technique, using the pick and the fingers. What's the benefit, Jack? What do we get from hybrid picking that we don't get from, alternate picking or finger picking?
I personally think hybrid picking's quicker than stuff like alternate picking and stuff like finger picking as well.
Just because you've got more things making contact with the string?
Yeah, and like you just got more kind of options with it really. Even though finger picking's great for adding texture, hybrid picking goes that extra mile in many ways because you can still vary the tick,
from the pick,
but you can still go. There's a huge difference between air and attack and softness, but you still have that
bit more range.
Combination. Yeah, exactly.
A bit more range. Okay, yeah, I get it now. I never properly understood the appeal, but yeah, I guess that's it, isn't it? There's a more range in how you can actually, make contact with the strings. Yeah, so it gives you a bit more leeway. Really cool. Okay, in the bonus pack for today's episode, you'll find some hybrid picking exercises. It's just a short article on that will help you understand that, and got some specific tabs there so you can have a stab at this. And we'll also include a link to a video that will be useful. So to check out the bonus pack for this episode, again, the web address for that is nationalguitaracademy.com/podcast3. Okay, now we're going to move on to theory tips. This is the part of the show where we share some bite-sized music theory tips. Okay, this week we're going to discuss something that's, I would say, absolutely essential knowledge for anybody who has an interest in lead guitar. and I'd say it's useful knowledge for people that maybe aren't necessarily like shredders, but they still want to understand how the guitar works. So we often hear, as if you're a guitar learner, Andy, so let's say you're a novice guitarist, you often hear about scales getting bandied around all the time. Yeah. So we hear about the major scale, we hear about the minor scale, but we also hear about the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic, and it can get quite confusing for people because it's like, it just sounds so like highbrow and impenetrable, and people kind of get confused. Can you just explain what the relationship is between those four scales that I just explained, that I just mentioned?
Yeah, well, it's like you say, I used to be quite scared of scales because you heard all these different scales mentioned. It just seemed like a minefield of infinite patterns of notes that I was supposed to learn. But
how many scales are there? It's like, there's a million. Yeah.
The best place to start is with the pentatonic. So don't try not to think about any other scales and just start on the pentatonics.
Yeah.
And the major pentatonic is a simplified version of the full major scale. And it's simpler in terms that it's got less notes, so it's easier to play, but it's also easier to use. And similar with the minor pentatonic. If you learn minor pentatonic, that's a simpler version of the minor scale.
Okay. So I guess the key point there is that we don't want people to think that the major scale is a different scale to the major pentatonic. Yeah. The major pentatonic is the major scale, but just in abridged form. Yeah. So the major pentatonic scale is the major scale with two notes taken out. Yeah. So
so for example, say you've had the major scale of C. The notes of that scale, there's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C again.
Yeah.
So what basically you do is, that's 8 notes. Pentatonic, penta meaning 5. You strip that back to the 5 essential notes of that scale. So you've got C, D, E, G, and A, and back to C again. And the beauty of that is because most scales, major scales or minor scales, they seem to have awkward notes or notes that can interfere and cause problems, disharmony, if you like. So, for example, in the C scale, when you're playing that, B and F are often what you call awkward notes that can cause problems, especially if you're doing some kind of lead. You suddenly hit a B or an F in the middle of a lead. It can cause awkward moments in terms of sound. So
I like that. It can cause awkward moments. Mm.
Yeah, so whereas if you've got you're just playing in the pentatonic, you don't tend to ever go out of tune, literally.
Yeah. So the pentatonic scales are much more forgiving.
Yes.
And they're more portable. They can be moved around the guitar neck in a way where you're going to be much more less likely to encounter those awkward moments. Okay, so really cool. I hope that's helpful, guys, because I know that a lot of people struggle with kind of scales and how it all fits together. But I hope that's useful, that you can now see that really the best way to think of this is just it's either the major scale or the minor scale. And if you want to make them easier to play and more portable, you can play those two scales in their pentatonic forms. In the bonus pack for today's episode, you'll find some really cool tabs of all of the scales that we've discussed there, but also some full neck diagrams so you can see like where those scales are on the whole guitar neck. That'll be really, really useful. And again, to get that, go to nationalguitaracademy.com/podcast3. Okay, now we're going to move on to the last part of the show, which is One Last Thing.
One last thing before you go. One last thing before you go.
One Last Thing is the part of the show where we leave you with a parting gift, something randomly cool or interesting about music or guitar culture. Okay, Jack, what's your one last thing for today's episode?
So this week I've been trying to gauge a little bit of extra inspiration for my own playing and stuff, so I made a conscious decision to go back and listen to some of the music which I used to love when I was first learning guitar. So the two kind of main artists which I used to listen to loads were people like Carlos Santana was a huge musical influence of mine when I was a kid. Yeah. And then the old school like Hendrix records as well, stuff like that. So just been diving into those. So I guess my kind of one last thing would be to find out who your musical heroes are and trying to, listen to them on a regular basis. And even if you want, go out and try it and see them, because that really helps, amplify your view of your musical heroes when you get to see them in a live, environment.
Really cool. Really cool. Thanks for that, mate. Yeah, I think they're like two, different guitarists, but they've got a similar thing going on, I think.
It's the whole improv thing, isn't it? And, people just going, Yeah, they're going a bit mental for sort of like
Yeah.
improvising.
Yeah, really cool. I'm pleased you've done that, mate. Just to kind of like, because I think there's a danger, isn't there, after a while, especially as you become an advanced guitarist, that you can lose sight of that
Yeah.
original, like, you know, inspiration or love or like whatever it was that got you fired up to learn in the
Yeah.
first place. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that one. Andy, what's your one last thing?
Well, and as well as playing guitar, I also play the banjo and the mandolin, but I don't play them anything like as well as I play the guitar. So I've been practicing those to try and improve on those a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so your recommendation would be that people explore some other stringed instruments.
Yeah.
What about the uke? Does the ukulele get a look in here, or are you like mandolin and banjo only?
Well, I have a ukulele as well, but I haven't played that for a while, so I should probably, also find some time to practice that.
Yeah, really cool. One of the good things I think about playing other stringed instruments is that you can bring a lot of the skills that you have from the guitar over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you might have to relearn new chord shapes, but you've got lots of that kind of muscle memory and dexterity.
Yeah.
So, but you get to explore it with a completely different voicing, don't you? Really cool. Rob, what's your one last thing?
Well, I've been convalescing after an operation on my shoulder, so haven't been able to actually partake in something musical. However, I have seen an intriguing message left on the robertplant.com website which says, "Anytime now." So rumours are rife about, does it hint at a Led Zeppelin reunion?
The Great Conjunction. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so-
finally happening.
So who knows? That's what I've been just getting excited about.
Yeah, the dream.
Yeah.
The dream. My one last thing for this week would be just a recommendation that if you're interested in guitar in any way, shape, or form, and you must be if you're at the end of this podcast about learning the guitar, I would recommend that you check out a film, or actually a documentary called "It Might Get Loud." You may be familiar with this. It was a documentary that was made in 2008, and it's basically got Jimmy Page, The Edge, and Jack White. They kind of sit around and discuss guitar playing and their approach to the instrument. And I just loved it. I've only watched it once, actually, but I've got to watch it again because I just loved it so much, just seeing a sort of window into their world and them kind of talking about how they perceive the instrument, and like very different guitarists as well, all three of them, but absolutely love it. So if you're interested in guitar music in any way, shape or form, definitely check out It Might Get Loud. Okay, thanks for joining us today, folks. Please let us know your thoughts on the show by emailing us at podcast@nationalguitaracademy.com. This is your podcast and we want to help you, so please let us know what you think works well in the show and what could be better. Remember, you can get daily guitar tips by following us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/National Guitar Academy. And lastly, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. 5-star reviews will help the show grow and help other guitar learners find our work. So if you've enjoyed this podcast and want to help us out, we would really appreciate it if you would leave us a review. Thanks so much for your support, and we'll see you again next time. For each podcast, we create a bonus pack that expands on what we've discussed in the episode. Each bonus pack includes video lessons, diagrams, chord boxes, links, and practice material that build on the things we've discussed in the podcast. There's only so much that we can explain through audio, and sometimes it's easier to show you stuff, and that's where the bonus packs come in handy. To download the bonus pack for this episode, go to nationalguitaracademy.com/podcast3.